United Lands. Not. Chapter 4, Lesson 3. Alternate title for this chapter could be Rise and Fall of Many Empires. The Acadians. Over time, conflicts weakened Sumer's city-states. This made them vulnerable to attacks by outside groups, such as the Acadians of the northern part of Mesopotamia. Sargon. The king of the Acadians was named Sargon. Here's a picture of him, as well as a mask based off his head. In about 2340 BC, Sargon conquered all of Mesopotamia. He then set up the world's first empire. An empire is a group of many different lands under one ruler. Sargon ruled his empire for more than 50 years. The empire that he created lasted for more than 200 years before it was weakened by fighting between its various cities and invasion by outsiders. Asshur and Nineveh. One of the cities of Sargon's empire was named Asshur, after the god that the people there worshipped. Asshur was located about 400 miles north of Sumer. Like the inhabitants of the other northern cities of Mesopotamia, such as Nineveh, the people of Asshur were polytheistic. That is, they believed in many gods, not just one. They worshipped their gods in their own language. In other ways, however, the people of the northern cities carried on Sumerian traditions. They built ziggurats, and they used cuneiform as their system of writing. The agriculture of Asshur was also similar to that of Sumer. Farmers grew a variety of crops, including wheat, barley, beans, lettuce, and cucumbers. They also grew date, palm, apple, and pomegranate trees, and they raised cattle for milk. At times they went to war against neighboring cities and peoples. In the centuries following the fall of Sargon's empire, Asshur would become the center of a new empire. Called the Land of Asshur, would become known later as Assyria. Babylonia and Assyria. In the 1800s BC, at about the same time that Asshur was growing in strength, another group of people became powerful in Babylonia, the southern part of Mesopotamia. The city of Babylon. The chief god of Babylonia was Marduk. The people who lived there built the city of Babylon by the Euphrates River. Babylon soon became a center of trade in goods such as silver, timber, copper, and wine. The Power of Hammurabi. Beginning in 1792 BC, the Babylonian king, Hamarabi, began conquering nearby cities. He created the Babylonian Empire, or Babylonia. In part, Hamarabi was able to gain power by controlling one of the region's most precious natural resources, the water of the Euphrates River. He built a dam across the river in order to control its flow. City-states below Babylon on the Euphrates had to cooperate with Hamarabi or face possible destruction. By 1750 BC, Hamarabi controlled all of Mesopotamia, including the cities of Asshur and Nineveh. Hammurabi's laws. Hammurabi is best known for his law code, or collection of laws. He took what he believed were the best laws from each city-state and put them in one code, pictured here on this statue. The code contained 282 laws in all, describing crimes, farming and business activities, and marriage and the family, almost every area of life. Although many punishments in the Code of Hammurabi seemed cruel to us, his laws marked an important step toward a fair system of justice. Assyria. About 1,000 years after Hammurabi, a new Assyrian empire arose in Mesopotamia. Assyria had fertile valleys that attracted outside invaders. To defend their land, the Assyrians built a large army. Around 900 BC, they began taking over the rest of Mesopotamia. Here's a picture of Assyria's fertile valleys. Of course, fertile valleys just mean that the soil was rich from nutrients that river would bring when it flooded, which allowed farmers to grow a lot of crops. Assyria's iron weapons. The Assyrian army was well organized. At its core were groups of foot soldiers armed with spears and daggers. Other soldiers were experts at using bows and arrows. The army also had chariot riders and soldiers who fought on horseback. This fearsome and mighty force was the first large army to use iron weapons. For centuries, iron had been used for tools, but it was too soft to use for weapons. Then, a people called the Hittites, who lived northwest of Assyria, developed a way of making iron stronger. They heated iron ore, hammered it, and rapidly cooled it. The Assyrians learned this technique from the Hittites. They produced iron weapons that were stronger than those made of copper or tin. Fierce Assyrian warriors. The Assyrians were ferocious warriors. To attack cities, they tunneled under walls or climbed over them on ladders. They used tree trunks as battering rams to knock down city gates. Once a city was captured, the Assyrians set fire to its buildings. They also carried away its people and goods. Anyone who resisted Assyrian rule was punished. The Assyrians drove people from their lands and moved them into foreign territory. Then they brought in new settlers and forced them to pay heavy taxes. A new way to govern. By about 650 BC, the Assyrian Empire stretched from the Persian Gulf in the east to Egypt's Nile River in the west. The capital was at Nineveh on the Tigris River. Assyrian kings had to be strong to rule their large empire. But no matter how strong he was, a king could not rule such a vast territory all by himself. The Assyrian kings divided the empire into provinces, or political districts. They chose officials to govern each province. These officials collected taxes and enforced the king's laws. Assyrian kings built roads, as pictured here, to join all parts of their empire. Government soldiers were posted at stations along these roads to protect traders from bandits or robbers. Messengers on government business used the stations to rest and change horses. Daily life in Assyria. The Assyrians lived much like other Mesopotamians. Their writing was based on Babylonian writing, and they worshipped many of the same gods. Their laws were similar, but lawbreakers often faced more brutal and cruel punishments in Assyria. As builders, the Assyrians showed great skill. They erected large temples and palaces that they filled with wall carvings and statues. In the center, you will see the Babylonian gardens, considered one of the great ancient wonders of the world. The Assyrians also produced and collected literature. They assembled one of the world's first libraries at Nineveh. It held 25,000 tablets of stories and songs to the gods. Modern historians have learned much about ancient civilizations from this library. Assyria's cruel treatment of people led to many rebellions. About 650 BC, the Assyrians began fighting each other over who would be their next king. A people called the Chaldeans seized the opportunity to rebel. They captured Nineveh in 612 BC, and the Assyrian Empire soon crumbled. Mighty Babylon. The Chaldeans wanted to build an empire of their own. led by King Nebuchadnezzar, they gained control of Mesopotamia and ruled it from 605 BC to 562 BC. Here's a picture of Nebuchadnezzar from that time period. The Chaldeans rebuilt the city of Babylon as the glorious center of their empire. Babylon quickly became the world's largest and richest city. It was surrounded by a brick wall so wide that 2 chariots could pass on the road on top. Built into the wall at 100-yard intervals were watchtowers. Large palaces and temples stood in the city's center. A huge ziggurat reached more than 300 feet into the sky. Another marvel, visible from any point in Babylon, was an immense staircase of greenery, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. These terraced gardens were said to have trees, masses of flowering vines, and other beautiful plants. A pump brought in water from a nearby river. It is said that Nebuchadnezzar built the gardens to please his wife, who missed the mountains and plants of her homeland. In describing the beauty of Babylon, one Greek historian from the 400s BC wrote, "In magnificence, there is no other city that approaches it." Outside the center of Babylon stood houses and marketplaces. Their artisans made pottery, cloth, baskets, and jewelry. They sold their wares to passing caravans or groups of traveling merchants. Located on the major trade route between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean Sea, Babylon became rich from trade. Chaldeans' rise and fall. Babylon was also a center of science. Like earlier people in Mesopotamia, the Chaldeans believed that changes in the sky revealed the plans of the gods. Their astronomers, or people who studied the heavens, mapped the stars, the planets, and the phases of the moon. The Chaldeans made one of the first sundials, as pictured here, next to a modern sundial, and were the first to have a 7-day week. End of an empire. As time passed, the Chaldeans weakened in power. They found it hard to control the peoples they had conquered. In 539 BC, Persians, people from Persia, from the mountains to the northeast, captured Babylon. Mesopotamia became part of the new Persian Empire.